I didn't realize I was still muted. Like Sue said, my name is Fernanda Campos. I am a doctor of physical therapy. I work primarily in pediatrics and mostly doing early intervention and in a clinic. I'm actually driving to the clinic right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and take off my video to be a little bit safer. And I am almost there, so I can put my video back on. The main purpose of this is for me to share my story. I came to the United States when I was 7 years old. My dad was already living here at the time, and so it was myself, my brother, and my mom that came to meet with him. Really had, I was 7, didn't have an understanding of what it meant to be undocumented and how that would continuously impact my life. But my parents were always very, very concentrated on us getting a good education and striving for, as far and as much as we could do. Originally, the plan was for us to learn English and go back to Mexico. But as we became more comfortable with our lives here, I, learned English, got involved in school. My mom became very comfortable with our lives here. It never ended up with us going back to Mexico. And not having documents didn't really hit me until, probably where it hits most people is when you're in driver's ed and they ask for your social security. And I knew I didn't have one. My parents were never not willing to tell us, or it wasn't like a huge secret. I knew I didn't have one, but I didn't realize, how it wouldn't just impact my ability to not be able to drive. Once college application started and all that, it seemed like more of a daunting thing of not having a social security because you couldn't apply for FAFSA. Many schools didn't have an option to not put it in for their applications. And I was very, very grateful to have found, St. Francis in Joliet, University of St. Francis in Joliet, and they helped me through the whole process and were able to, I was able to get a good amount of scholarships to attend the university. And at that point, everything just kind of, it became real. And then I'm on the fortunate side of things where right as I was graduating from high school, it was when President Obama passed DACA. So we quickly, applied for the benefit. And I got my DACA, which made things significantly easier. I was able to work through my undergrad, save a little bit of money. And then at that point, physical therapy really became an option. I had learned about physical therapy in middle school and was really, really interested, but knew that without, a social security number, things would be a lot more difficult for me to actually get a job in the field. So with DACA, it was now a possibility. And I know, the session kind of concentrates on those now, which is, it's really hard for me to imagine anyone going through or wanting to, become a professional and, work with whatever population they want to work with, whether it's in medical school, law school, and just me talking personally in physical therapy, a lot of things would have been, impossible to have completed without having a social security number. For my clinicals, they always ask for it because a lot of the times you are almost considered an employee at their location. So it's really hard to think of how it would be able to, go about. And as now, like, okay, I'm a professional, I have my career, established. It's hard to think of now all the Hi, I think it disconnected. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
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 Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So it's really hard for me to think about all the young, kids who are unable to apply, who are eligible for the program but can't apply for it. So I'm really glad, you guys are in this session and talking about what other options, what they are able to do to continue to progress in their education and figure out other professions that they can apply for or, pursue. Um, because I do think it, as counselors, you have to have that real and honest conversation with them of if they are seeking out something like physical therapy, it would honestly be very, very difficult to have. And I had counselors, because a lot of counselors didn't know at the time when I was going through the process that it was possible that I could do it with DACA. So I had counselors tell me, I'm so sorry, like this is not going to be something you're going to be able to pursue. And I'm really glad I stuck with it. But looking back on it, it would have been really, really difficult without without being documented. And yeah, I mean, I guess that really, compounds my story. I don't know if I, missed anything that's important. Like I said, I'm always able or willing to talk to, any student who is in a similar situation. I think they have uh, my contact information, and anytime you have questions, please feel free to send me an email or send me the contact information of a student that you might come across that is in the same situation. And yeah, I think that's mostly my story. Any questions or parts that I've missed that are of interest?
Fernanda will be hopping off in just a minute. So if you have questions specifically for Fernanda, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
Hi, yes, I had a question for you. You mentioned that you had a counselor and they really weren't aware of the DACA option. So at that time when you were going through high school, were you not aware of DACA and its existence, or was it that you weren't eligible at the time, or how was that time during high school for you?
So the program came out in 2012. I graduated in 2013. So I had just applied for it when I was graduating. Actually, it came on it was close to my birthday. So I remember it was like January 26th, it came of 2013 that my DACA came in. And yeah, I mean, the counselors just weren't really aware. They knew I could go through school, but they really weren't aware if I could pursue on a, graduate degree. So that was kind of challenging. It was not so much that they were being, malicious or not wanting me to continue my education. It was, they just didn't know it was possible now with DACA to complete the program.
Okay, got it. So it was fairly new. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was just new at the time.
Fernanda, thank you for sharing and the experiences of many others. My question was just, did you find any assistance at either home or at your consulate? I'm trying to, in helping students, I'm trying to identify different places where they can get help so they don't feel that they're alone in this process. I'm just curious for you if there was any type of support in any of those places.
Like my parents, like home as my parents, or like home as like Mexico?
Tías, abuelos, abuelas, padrinos, anybody, was there anybody around to help you? And did you reach out to the consulate otherwise?
I mean, my parents were always really supportive of, me continuing to do school and continuing after high school. I think that was my dad's, dream for us. But they also didn't know how to navigate the process. The educational system is very different from, Mexico. So it was a lot on me asking questions. My high school guidance counselor, as into getting into college, he was super, really, really helpful, would send me, scholarships to apply for continuously that he thought I would be able to get. And then I did, as many of you guys know, Eric Ruiz, find him eventually, and he was a huge, huge help with the process. But as far as support wise and people being for me, I knew I had. It was just, I didn't really have someone in my family who knew how to navigate the educational system. And the consulate, I never really reached out to the consulate. So that's a good one. I don't know if they would be of any assistance.
Yeah, I'm doing some research on that, and that's my thing, right? How can the foreign countries where we come from help us better? Because we're still their citizens, even if we're in a different land. So I think, holding them a little bit more accountable, it's important. But that's why I was asking, but thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think to reach out to them. Okay. Any other questions? If not, I know you have my contact information.
You're on mute, Fernanda.
Why does it keep doing that? I was just gonna say I'm gonna hop out, but if you have any questions, I know you have my contact information, and you can reach out and you want to talk more about even the process. Obviously, I couldn't pay for physical therapy on my own, so the process of getting a loan, and that was really difficult because I was still someone who was not considered. I was with DACA, so you can't really apply for federal loans. So that was another challenging, part, and just trying to figure it out because I had one family member who's a citizen who was able to help me co-sign a loan to be able to pay for physical therapy school. So any of those questions, or if you have students who are going through it, please feel free to reach out. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a good rest of the conference. Okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Bye.
And now, Susie, if you want to share your screen and begin your presentation.
Good morning, everyone. So as I mentioned, my name is Susie Sandoval Vargas. I am a staff attorney with the Mexican American Education and Legal Defense Fund, and also known as MALDEF. MALDEF is a legal nonprofit that focuses on helping Latinos enforce and protect their civil rights, specifically in 4 areas: employment, education, political access, and immigrant rights, which is not to be confused with immigration rights. So at MALDEF, we are not immigration attorneys. We focus on individuals' civil rights. Excuse me. MALDEF is a nationwide nonprofit, so we have offices across the United States. I work in the Midwest office, which provides services to 14 states. A little background on me: I was born in Mexico City, Mexico. I was raised in Chicago, Illinois since I was 2 years old. I went to University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign for undergraduate, and in 2019, I achieved my dream of graduating from law school and was the first in my family. So I understand some of the struggles as a first-generation Latina. Similar to Fernanda, I was discouraged very early on in my dream to becoming an attorney. I remember my counselors telling me that becoming a lawyer was simply not in the cards for me, and I was going to be very discouraged. But fortunately for me, I had people in my corner. I had my family. I had counselors through scholarships that encouraged me to just keep moving forward one day at a time, and that hopefully with that one day my dream would come true. And they were right. So I'm really thankful to be part of this conference today, because I remember when I was younger, these resources were not so readily available to me. And so I think they're very important. I'm going to stop sharing my camera just so that you can hear me clearly, and also going to start sharing the presentation. I will leave time at the end for any questions, so please let us know if you have any. Okay. So let's talk about what you need to know about your career options. The first thing is that your choice matters. What is it that you want to do? That's the first question that you should be asking yourself. What is it that you want to do? Now, it's okay if you don't know 100% at the beginning. I know that while I've always known that I wanted to be an attorney, I did think about other options. I thought about computer science and other careers, but I always went back to being an attorney in the end. So first, answer that question for yourself. What is it that you want to do? Once you know that question for yourself, it's time to do a little bit research, use your resources and ask some questions. As I mentioned, I remember that as a first generation future attorney, there weren't so many resources readily available to me and I had to use what I had. Luckily, the internet was around by then, so I'm not dating myself too much there. But basically, the questions that you want to ask next is, what degree and training do you need to do what you want to do? So for me, that was become an attorney. So how many years would I have to go to school? How would I finance my education? Did I need to obtain a special license to become an attorney? Those were some of the questions that I was asking myself. Now, today I want to focus on two questions that you might be asking yourself. One, do I need employment authorization for the career that I want to pursue? And two, will I need a professional license? And we'll get into this, but these two are different things, and sometimes you don't necessarily need a professional license. Now, something important to know is that students are entitled to free public education through the 12th grade in the United States. And in Illinois, usually students are entitled to financial aid. However, undocumented students are barred from federal financial aid. Now, employment authorization. Now, employers are obligated to hire people who have authorization to work in the United States. They must verify that their employer's identity and work authorization. And this is done through the form I-9, which some of you may have filled out. However, employers cannot discriminate against an employer with temporary authorization. Now, what do I mean by that? So we have seen that some employers have been hesitant to hire DACA recipients simply because their work authorization is granted for two-year periods at a time and can be renewed. So sometimes the employer's argument is that they don't want to invest time to train and put time into this individual because they don't know if after those 2 years that individual will be able to renew that work permit. But we have successfully litigated several cases where employers did just this and were successful in showing that employers cannot discriminate you because of your work authorization being temporary. Now, employers should not re-verify unless your employment document has expired or they're asking all employees to re-verify. They should not single you out and say, I just want to re-verify your work authorization if one of these two is not happening. Now, beyond being an employee, there's independent contractors. Independent contractors are generally self-employed and contracted for a limited amount of time. Now, caution, it is not, an independent contractor is a legal term and is defined by the law. So it is not sufficient for your employer to just deem you an independent contractor. There are specific things that the law defines as an independent contractor. If you have questions about these, feel free to call our office or any other attorney that can help you understand whether or not you're an independent contractor. Now, unlike employers, clients, so let's say someone hires you to build a house, are not necessarily required to check your employment authorization. However, they may not knowingly hire someone who is unauthorized to work. So sometimes what has happened is individuals have, for example, applied for DACA and the employer knew that they had DACA, and for some reason or another, that individual let their DACA status expire and didn't renew. So at this point, your employer now knows that you are undocumented and not authorized to work. They cannot simply turn around and make you an independent contractor because they cannot knowingly hire someone who is unauthorized to work. So another option that some individuals have considered is creating a business. So this helps to manage your business, protect your personal finances, and limits your liability if something goes wrong. But it does not reduce the risk of enforcement of other immigration laws. And the same requirements that I just mentioned would apply to you as a business owner. So if you are hiring employees, you would have to know that they are work authorized, and you would not be able to knowingly hire someone who is unauthorized to work if you're hiring them as an independent contractor. Now, are there risks? Could self-employment and creating a business be held against somebody when they are adjusting status? Could it be considered unauthorized employment? Now, attorneys have, there's this joke that attorneys, anytime you ask them a question, our answer is, it depends. Well, that is the answer here. It's going to depend. Every single person's circumstances are very individual to them. So you might be applying to different visas, you might have different background, you might fall into different categories. So this is a question that you want to consult with an experienced immigration lawyer first. So if you're considering one of these options, we do recommend consulting with an experienced immigration lawyer who can answer this question specifically to your circumstances. Now, professional licenses are different than work authorization. Professional and occupational licenses are issued by each state and are required for specific industries. So for example, myself, I did have to get a license to be able to practice in the state of Illinois. Similar doctors, cosmetologists, real estate agents, and other professions require similar licenses. In Illinois, immigration status is not a factor for most licenses. All qualified individuals can obtain a license to practice the profession for which they are trained. However, it is important to note that even though you have a professional license, that license is not authorizing you to work. That's just professional license and work authorizations are two separate things. Practicing without a license can be a state criminal offense. So one of the questions you want to ask is, where do you want to pursue your career? Which state? Make yourself familiar with the laws of that state, the requirements for obtaining that professional license. Now, state licenses don't give federal employment authorization, but not all professions require a professional license. So these are important questions to ask yourself. Do I need work authorization? Do I need a professional license for the career that I'm trying to move forward with? Now, several states have granted access to professional license for DACA recipients and undocumented students that are not necessarily documented. Now, this map is not 100% updated, but you'll see that Illinois, California, and Nevada are 3 states that have allowed for immigration status to not be a requirement for professional licenses. Each day, different states open up the professional license requirements, but some states only allow them to DACA recipients like Florida and Pennsylvania. And so you want to really think about, where is it that I want to pursue my career, which state, and then make a plan for that state. Now, what I want to make clear here, the most important part is to make a plan, ask questions, start engaging with the individuals who can help you answer these questions as early as often, and determine whether there's going to be hurdles. So some other hurdles that I have seen for undocumented students is, for example, when someone wants to be a social worker, because if you're going to be involved with children, you might be required to take a criminal background check. And so for some individuals, that might be a concern, and they usually consult with an immigration attorney before going through and putting themselves through a criminal background. So that might be another question that you might want to ask yourself. Is that another requirement? The most important thing is that whatever career choice that you choose to pursue, you know what the requirements are going to be and whether or not those are going to be hurdles to you getting there. Now, I will open it up to any questions.
I have a question, Susie. So I have more than one, so I'm going to ask my first one and then I'll come back for the second one. But do you have resources where students can get ITIN numbers, or how to apply in the whole process? A lot of times immigration lawyers say like, oh, I don't do the ITIN number piece. And I know for our students who are from India, this is problematic because they can't renew their passports from the US. They actually, so I have several students who are from India. Once their passports expire, they're stuck and they don't have a way to obtain an ITIN number. So I don't know if there's a list of somewhere where, you know, guideline or best tips. I know Immigrants Rising has some, but wasn't sure if Illinois had something.
Yes, of course. So I know that one of the best guidelines is going to be the IRS website, because they are the ones who issued the ITIN number. And the last time I checked, they did have a detailed guidance of the requirements, what documents, where to submit them. If I'm not wrong, I believe they might now have an online process. Don't quote me on that. But I would be happy to check the IRS website and see if there's any resources. Also, during tax season, I did see in Illinois that there were several organizations, maybe someone on this call knows, that were providing assistance to apply for ITIN numbers. And I would think that other states would have similar organizations that provide that guidance.
We have a question in the chat here, Susie. It asks if can MALDEF provide legal advice for folks trying to open their own business? It seems folks thinking about entrepreneurship would need legal business and legal immigration advice. Does MALDEF support with that type of guidance?
Good question. So MALDEF focuses purely on civil rights. However, we do want to be a resource to the community and always welcome all calls. And when MALDEF cannot provide the services that the individual is looking for, we do try to guide them to someone else who could provide those services. So off the top of my mind, I know that in Illinois, several of the law schools have clinics for helping with starting a business. So I'm happy to pass along the information to those clinics. But if you know an individual that has more specific questions, even if MALDEF can't assist them directly, we would be happy to provide them some resources.
Thank you, Abel. Abel did put a resource in the chat from Ladder Up that helps individuals obtain an ITIN number. And Sandy, did you have your second question that you wanted to ask, or was that covered?
It was covered. Thanks.
Okay. Other questions regarding professional licenses or anything in general?
And just for clarification, the ITIN number, to my understanding, is only for tax purposes. It does not grant employment authorization. Is that correct?
Great question, Lisette. Yes, you are correct. ITIN number is only for tax purposes. It doesn't provide any type of status. It doesn't provide work authorization. However, if I understand correctly, the reason for the question is sometimes schools will allow an individual to use their ITIN as an identification number. But I'm not 100% sure on that.
Susie, can you speak to the advantages of having an ITIN number for an undocumented individual, or how you would advise an individual if they should or should not obtain one?
So I can't speak specifically to whether or not someone should obtain one. I do encourage everyone to visit the irs.gov website. There are details of what the purpose for an ITIN number is, what the benefits of having one. As Lisette mentioned, it is meant purely for immigration purposes. However, some organizations, entities have allowed individuals to use it as an identification number. From my understanding, schools allow students to use it in place of a social security number, just purely as an identification number. Some banks also allow individuals, for example, to obtain loans with an ITIN number. I am not an expert on that, so I can't speak necessarily to that, but there are several organizations in Illinois that can provide guidance in that area. And I'd be happy to share those.
If I may, I like to encourage everybody to get an ITIN number. Filing your tax returns is very important for purposes of financial aid, because if you're above a certain threshold of income, you're going to be required to file a tax return. Otherwise, your financial aid can be held up. And I'll be actually talking about that in my session at 1 o'clock. So that's a plug for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Abel. So we do have an expert on here that can answer all of your questions on ITIN. Highly encourage you to join Abel's presentation.
Now, in reference to what Dr. Lopez just posted, that the ITIN number can be used for licensure exams for students without DACA. Now, in this particular case, for instance, would a student be able with this, like take the NCLEX for like nursing or something like that? And like, I just kind of asked more so because of like the background check that I think previously would have been an issue.
Sorry, Christopher, I'm not sure I understand your question.
I'm saying like, so the student with the I-10 would be able to sit for licensure with the I-10 in this case.
So I'm not familiar with the requirements for each different profession, but what I would do and encourage everyone to do is look into each profession's requirements and see if they allow you to use the I-10 to, for example, sit for an exam or apply for it. What the law says is that your immigration status shouldn't be a barrier for your professional license. So if you, for example, find, and we have found these, is individuals applying for certain professional licenses and the application says, are you a citizen of the United States? Or it says, what is your immigration status? Then those are applications that we would encourage you to either bring to our attention or someone's attention, because what shouldn't be a barrier is your immigration status.
Understood.
Now, is that state by state, or are you just general Illinois?
Great question. So that is very specific to Illinois, and it is going to vary state by state. So that map that I brought up showed some of the states that have passed similar laws to Illinois. So for example, California and Nevada. And then there's other states that provide very specific, open doors to very specific professions. So they might say you can apply for everything except to be an attorney without immigration status. So Illinois opens the door for almost everything except an attorney. So it is very specific state to state. So that is why I do encourage you look at the law in each state. And we're happy to answer questions. So if anybody has any specific questions to a certain state, feel free to call our office.
We do have a couple questions in the chat. The first one, is there a way for advisors, school counselors, career counselors to provide undocumented students career choices / licenses? Also, some nursing schools in Illinois require a background check, so most students do not go into nursing for that reason.
So we have found similar students that have gone 3 years of education only to find out in the end, because they weren't aware and didn't engage in these conversations early on as to what the requirements were. And one of them is this background check. And so for certain professions, like for example, to be a social worker, there's a very good reason for that background check. You're going to be working with children. So it is something to consider very early on if that is going to be a barrier to you. And so that conversation is better had with an immigration attorney who can kind of guide you of what the risks are of having that background check.
There's another question in the chat, and then Sandy, I saw your hand, so we could go to you right after. Would you say that students with DACA can obtain a professional license, for example, nursing, teaching, etc., or would it depend on the state? And what if the law in the state is vague? I think you covered that.
Yeah, I can briefly cover it. Yeah, so in Illinois, immigration status should not be a barrier to most professional licenses. To become an attorney, you do have to have at least DACA status. So that is one of the limitations there. And then it is going to vary state by state. The map that I shared showed some of them, but not every state allows immigration status to not be a barrier to professional licenses.
Sandy, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I don't know if Tanya's here, but there was a bill that Representative Maurer Hirschauer was pushing through, House Bill 4332. It's the Healthcare Registry and Identity Bill, because I think it was Christopher who was asking the question about that background check. Even though House Bill or Senate Bill 3109, the licensure bill that was being mentioned, had passed, it was that background check that was stopping a lot of our students from getting to that next step, right? And so Representative Hirschauer met with a few of us and we talked about the importance of getting to that next step and passing that background check. So I wanted to know, I can't remember what the date is, but I think starting in the fall, this is going to take effect, but I'm trying to verify that. Again, it's House Bill 4332, and it's called the Healthcare Registry and Identity Bill. So we'll talk about that one later on, and we can share some info with everyone too, but that is something that people need to be made aware of. And again, we don't know what the future holds. I think that was something that was really important that was being said in the beginning, right? We don't know how people's statuses are going to change or not change or what have you, but to have that education, that licensure, that pass that background check, I think is a great step, in the right direction.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was referencing to, and I think Rachel kind of touches on it too in the chat. I'm fairly new to this, so I sorry if I kind of kind of get this wrong, but yeah, it was my understanding that. So now with the I-10, it looks like they could apply for licensure test, but what was holding them back was the background check, because even if you can sit, but you can't get the background check to work at a school or a hospital or as a social work, for example, it's kind of like a moot point at that, in that area. So now with that House bill, yeah, so I'm wondering, so now it will kind of just hopefully expedite this and kind of, let the students move forward with, certain careers. So, all right, thanks for clearing that up.
Thank you, Dr. Lopez and Christopher. Yeah, no, I think that's a very important thing to note, is that things are constantly changing. And so sometimes it's something to consider. Is it good to start now? And then maybe in the near future, things are constantly changing and for the better, as Dr. Lopez just mentioned. So that's also something to consider as you are applying and deciding on what career path to take. How are things progressing? How things are changing? And we're lucky that in the state of Illinois, we have all of these positive laws.
We have a recommendation in the chat. One thing that might help if students, one thing that might help if you're on a college campus is connecting with the international student advisors. The application for DACA is the same as post-degree completion employment for international students, and they encounter some of the same hurdles with licensing and clinicals. Any other questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute for Susie?
I think I'm reading the chat, and one of the comments was that I think the challenge might not be obtaining the license, but once they have obtained it, the employment part, that verification of employment, I think is where a lot of the students have that concern about, I can get this license, but then how am I going to be authorized to work, right? And I just that's kind of where I get lost with students too. I really don't know where to steer them from that point unless they're already in the process of obtaining a work permit or something like that. So any suggestions when we're working with students that fall into that category?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. So that is one of the biggest hurdles. And so from what we have seen is individuals have considered either being an independent contractor or starting a business. However, as I mentioned, all of these have risks, and you always want to consult with an immigration attorney to make sure that this is not going to affect, for example, a future adjustment of status application. Let's say in the future they get married to a US citizen or something that gives them the ability to apply to adjustment of status. You don't want a decision that they made now to then create barriers for them later. So it's always advised that they consult with an immigration attorney. I know that that's not what everybody wants to hear, but that is honestly the best advice as they take these decisions in their future. We understand that they have to work and they have to provide for themselves, for their families. And so these are options, but they should definitely weigh the risks.
If there are no more questions, oh, go ahead.
I'm just going to ask really quickly. Hi, Susie. How are you? If there are any, I think if there's one thing that you want participants to walk away from the session knowing, what would you say it would be the highlight?
That's a great question. So I will leave you with my story. So I would say that the number one thing is I would say don't get discouraged. When I started my journey, I was an undocumented immigrant. When that career counselor told me that I should not pursue a legal career, it wasn't because there was any malice, as Fernanda said, or because she wanted to prevent me from achieving my dream. It's just she did not think it was something attainable for me. And back then there wasn't DACA, and I didn't know that DACA was going to ever exist. But I kept pushing one day at a time. And I did have, I think Lisa asked a question, did you have a support system? I did. I had my family, I had advisors, I had mentors who basically said, just take it one day at a time. You never know how the law is going to change. And for me, that was a good choice because I wasn't behind once DACA passed, and I was able to go straight into law school and become an attorney.
Thank you, Susie. I did see Cindy. Did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I just wanted to just add a couple of things. I think these are some great questions that we're asking about. Great, we can get licenses, but we can't work even though we have a license. I think it's also a question for our allies and our accomplices and everyone who is willing and open to hire independent contractors, right? Without asking about immigration status. I think right now, so many of us are coming to terms with the fact that our students don't have DACA, our students have not been able to apply, and our students may not be able to apply for DACA as a relief. And even those who have DACA, we are at risk of losing DACA, right? And so I think really this is a call for our allies and our accomplices, our institutions, our nonprofit partners, individuals to figure out how do we hire independent contractors without knowingly hiring undocumented people or people who aren't able to work? How are we creating those co-ops and giving those resources so that we can create those co-ops, businesses, whatever it is that we want to create so that individuals can work or maybe not work, but they can continue developing their skills. They can continue contributing and using those degrees, right? And so I know we don't have answers to a lot of these questions, but I think it's up to us to figure out those answers and figure out how do we do this. This isn't new. We've been navigating this situation pre-DACA. We navigated this, trying to figure it out in 2016, 17 when DACA was at risk, and we're back at it again. And so just wanted to just put a call out to our allies and our accomplices. What are we doing? What can we do? And how do we support our students? I think, yes, consult with an immigration attorney, do this and that, but what are we doing? And so just want to put that out there. And for all undocumented folks on the call as well, keep getting those licenses, keep getting those degrees. You don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what, if something will happen. We don't know if we'll figure out alternatives. Undocumented people have been figuring out how to survive in this country for years, and we're going to make it happen however we can, but we need our allies and our accomplices at the table. And so just wanted to put that out there because I don't want to end with like, we don't know, we'll figure it out, but what are we going to figure out? How are we going to do it? And so just a call to our allies and our accomplices to let's do something instead of what is there to do? It's up to us. So just wanted to end with that.
Cindy, I think you're making a really good point. Susie, my name is Nadia Flores. I work for HFS Chicago Scholars. I think it's really important that one of the answers is, and I guess this is a case-by-case basis, but one of the things that I used to do and I've been doing is that almost every single student that I talk to and I make reference to in regards to the resources for our undocumented students, DACA recipients, et cetera, I do make a note to make sure that they understand that things can change, things are available, there could be limitations, et cetera. I do feel that many of our students, especially at the high school level, they need to learn about business. They need to learn about entrepreneurship. They need to learn about soft skills, right? A lot of these resources, unfortunately, have been taken away from many of our schools, especially within the Chicago public schools. But I do feel that when I was a former high school counselor, I made sure to let them know, I need you to still, if and when you go to college, I still need you to really strongly consider taking business courses where you can find yourself, if the situation does come about, you have a door to become an entrepreneur. Some of my students listened. I was really happy with those that did listen, and they are, self-sufficient and they do have a business. It's not the easiest road, but I think it is a door for them. And I think that for any of our college and career coaches out there or school counselors, or maybe even at the college level, right, continuing to support those students and just kind of plugging that idea in. it's not going to be the, I guess, the answer for everyone. And it could probably even upset some people because they may feel like, you know, you're probably not trying to advocate for me, but at the same time, you know, my message is more so like, I want there to be a light at the end of the tunnel for you. And I think that by seeking out entrepreneurship or just being your own business owner in your area of expertise, it should be your plan B, if that makes any sense. And I think that's something that's definitely a way to start that conversation with your students, their parents, you know, your respective school or wherever they plan to go to.
Hi, Nadia. Thank you for that. I am actually an HFS alum. Mike Cannelli and Desiree Pepper-Vinzant were two of my greatest mentors. So it's so happy to see you on this call. Yeah, I think that keep pushing along, don't get discouraged. But at the same time, at the other end of the spectrum, I did see friends and colleagues who just did not have the information from the beginning, did not engage, and then they got all the way to the end only to find out that they couldn't do anything. So it is important to also set realistic expectations. Just because I have seen the other end of the spectrum, I think that everybody on here is very well informed. Unfortunately, not all school counselors and all schools provide or have staff that are informed to these specific situations. And so the students at those other institutions might not be as well prepared. So also just manage expectations is the other thing I would say. Well, if there's no other questions, I did share my information, and I do encourage that if anybody has questions about professional licenses or anything else, like as I mentioned, MALDEF wants to be here for the community. So even if we can't help you, we do help guide you to the right organization or resources that may help you. So I shared my email and our office phone number and would be happy to hear from any of you.
Susie, thank you so much for your time and expertise. We will end the Zoom meeting. If you want to stick around and have any individual questions, we still have about 10 minutes, but if not, you can take a break until your next session. Have a great day, everyone.
Susie, I'm so excited that you're an HFS alumna. I'm the new director of college advancement. So definitely, you know, stepping into Matt Seuss. I don't know if you had a chance to work with him, but stepping into his big shoes. So I'm really excited to be a part of this organization and their family and such fantastic students. But I do think that making sure that I'm educated and up to date with all of my resources for any student that is undocumented, it's important, right? We shouldn't just assume.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that has been a message or the culture in almost every single employer that I've been with, that they basically say, oh, you know, we don't have students like those here, or it's been a few years, or, you know, it will get to it when it becomes, you know, an issue. And I just kind of feel like that's not the approach. So definitely, you know, I'm excited to be a part of HFS. So I'm really happy to see that you're an alum.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. Please send my hellos to Mike and Desiree, and I'm happy to connect if you have any other questions in the future, Nadia.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Great job today, everybody.
Thank you. I'll stay a few more minutes just in case.
Hi, Susie. My name is Marisol. Excuse me. I'm the new undocumented student liaison for Morton College. I greatly appreciate you taking some time to share your story and sharing resources. Just wanted to grab your contact information once more, just to be sure if there's any questions I might have or any referrals I would like to make to students. Just wanted to make sure I have that.
Of course, let me share it in the chat for everyone.
Thank you.
There you go. Well, thank you again for having me. I'm going to hop off. If they have any further questions, feel free to share my contact information. It's on the PowerPoint. I can share the PowerPoint with you.
Yes, thank you so much, Susie. Have a great day.
Of course. Take care.
Bye.